Greetings, colleagues and professors. My name is Madison Stiffler, and I'm pleased to present to you my research on Mexican feminicide, the colonialist implications that arise with the promotion of scientific knowledge amidst the activist response. This research was supervised by esteemed Dr. Maria DePaoli in our class together, Spanish America Today. As an overview, feminicide in Mexico is an incomprehensible tragedy related to gender-based violence against women on a mass scale. What's crucial to understand is the ways in which this violence is state-sanctioned, not only the complacency of the state, but its active role in feminicide is fundamental to my argument. Another fundamental concept is intersectionality. And intersectionality is a lens through which to see the ways which multiple identities, various identities, intersect and interact simultaneously to produce unique lived realities for people, unique experiences. So the work I looked to as my primary source in my research was that of Dolores Figueroa Romero. Her article, Politics of Feminicide in Mexico, Intersectional Perspectives of Indigenous Women for the Reconsideration of Their Theoretical and Legal Definition and the Methodology of Data Collection. What I found in my research is that the mainstream Mexican feminist response to feminicide employs a fairly institutional framework. This is one which perpetuates an unequal and hegemonic relationship to Indigenous feminism. Essentially, what's happening is there is too much of a reliance on statistical data in order to spread awareness about the breadth of the issue of feminicide. There's a misrepresentation and underrepresentation of Indigenous women within such data. This, Romero argues, is due to the state-sourced data as based in profit, which rarely employs an intersectional and anti-colonial lens, if ever. What's happening is that Indigenous women are faced with contempt and dismissal of their own lives and experiences, of course, misrepresentation, underrepresentation, and essentially the making of themselves invisible across such data and across the issue of feminicide as it's looked at in the mainstream discourse, in the mainstream media. So this comes from a lack of consideration for the complexity of violence as it expands to Indigenous municipalities. For example, structural violence experienced by Indigenous women cannot adequately be represented through quantitative statistical data. While Romero argues for both the quantitative and qualitative scientific methodologies and their usage of the feminist response, the mainstream feminist response to usage of both methodologies, I instead argue for the need for the Indigenous knowledge production and the recognition of scientific knowledge production as a colonial power dynamic. My thesis is this. Institutional Mexican feminism has looked toward quote-unquote official statistical data, particularly those governed by or beneath the influence of the state, as a supposedly objective tool for the spreading of information about feminicide. In doing this, such feminists have been complicit in the misrepresentation and underrepresentation of feminicides against Indigenous women. Given the historic relationship between modern science and colonialism, one can never trust in such imperialist tools for the relaying of adequate representation of Indigenous women. It is due to this that Mexican feminists, together with the collaboration and leadership of Indigenous women, should adopt a methodology that is, in some ways, abstract, and which goes beyond the epistemology of institutionalized scientific investigation. This methodology instead participates in the production of Indigenous knowledge. It is through such production which one can account for and consider diverse types of violence, not least of which structural, in the framework of the feminist movement against feminicide. Two crucial authors and fundamental to the formation of my argument were Jessica Kolopenuk and Robin Kimmerer. These Indigenous female scholars produce Indigenous knowledge which recognizes the inseparable relationship between scientific knowledge production and colonial power dynamics. It also recognizes the collection and exchange of quote-unquote official data as liberal modes of inclusion. Of course, these liberal modes of inclusion in the case of Mexican feminicide were meant to create a sociological profile of victimhood in order to raise consciousness and spread awareness about who is being affected by this issue and how many and in what ways. And unfortunately, this methodology is instead a product of Eurocentric scientific methods inherently related to a colonial project and cannot therefore adequately represent Indigenous experience. So what can be done? Well, we can eliminate the dependence upon a framework of scientific knowledge production. We can eliminate the dependence upon statistical data, scientific data, and the holding of this as objective truth, because it's not objective truth. It's not inclusive of Indigenous knowledge production. What is an intersectional and anti-colonial way of thought, way of action in resistance. This resistance requires an engagement with and leadership from Indigenous women, but most importantly, the centering of the Indigenous experience within the framework. In my own research process, I found it difficult to argue for the coloniality of science, especially within a Western context, as it is so often held as objective truth within our society. I even found it difficult to steer clear of scientific methodology related to colonialist power dynamics in my own research process. Of course, this is all I've been taught how to do, all I've known, so I was myself complacent at times in colonial power dynamics through science as an institution. This is why I chose to at least try to center Indigenous women and Indigenous thought from Kolopenuk and Kimmerer in my own argument. This has been important to me as a researcher and as a feminist. Thank you so much for your time.